I'm just going to change tack completely now, although it's still family-centered. We're going to move away from what a lot of which is private sector, what we've heard about the Philippines is more government, and Alisa is trying to address, but a lot of it is private sector. And for me, I came from a government training background. I trained I survived training as a student nurse, 4 years of grueling service to the country, I reckon. I always say it was the only thing that could be compared to it would be the first few years of military service. In fact, the first year repeated, maybe, for 4 years. And after having done that, I travelled and worked overseas, and I came back and I worked in Khayelitsha as a midwife. I'd done my training in Mitchell's Plain, in Guguletu, and then I came back and I worked in Khayelitsha in Harare. They just opened Michael Mapangwana Hospital. I'm sure some of you here know Michael Mapangwana. It's an MOU, so it's, again, it's a midwife obstetric unit. Usually there's no obstetric. And at that time, it was also a time of unrest, so the doctors came in if there weren't riots and trouble in the township. So it was very much a midwife unit, where you would learn to deal with all things, and if there were complications, you would transfer into one of the bigger hospitals. Hopefully an ambulance would come, which could still take 3 hours, which you would bag and mask a baby for 3 hours while you waited. I'm sure you still wait for ambulances. Do you still wait for ambulances? No? They're quicker. Yeah, they never used to be quick. Anyway, while I was there, and even during my training, I had come to a place where I wanted to do something in a rural area. I wanted to be in Transkei, actually. I wanted to open a centre that met those women that were in Khayelitsha before they got to Khayelitsha. Because many women moved to the cities when they were pregnant. Many women came to Khayelitsha unbooked to have babies. And it felt like you were kind of meeting something at the end of the road rather than at the beginning. So my vision at that time was to build something in a rural area that met the need in the villages and could actually kind of make a pleasant experience where you didn't have to go to a crowded informal settlement and try and find somewhere to stay, walk for a long way to kind of get to a clinic, have a baby, walk back, live in that kind of environment which is not conducive to a healthy baby or mother, and then probably send your baby back to rural areas while you stayed and tried to find work, which is the situation for many women in Khayelitsha and in those areas. And I loved working in those places. I loved the MOUs. I think the MOUs are an amazing model, actually. The fact that they are overworked. At that time, Khayelitsha Hospital was having 40 births a day. And not Michael Mapangwana, but Khayelitsha Hospital. And it was really a factory. You felt like a robot. One would kind of put the light up for pushing or not pushing, or you're a woman in a row, can you get your gloves off in time to get the next baby? And for me, it was overwhelming, the type of needs of the women, because the women had the needs. They weren't met. They did have their babies, and they had very good outcomes, despite the situations. Even if you look through a register, if you go into any midwife obstetric unit, you look at the register, there's intact perineums, pretty much. It's a very, very high rate of intact perineums, no episiotomies, well-delivered babies. There's a lot of healthy, good ACPA babies coming out of MOUs because those midwives are working very hard to get a good outcome for their mothers. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to make something else that could meet the need differently. That was how I started thinking. And then I went over to the UK, and until that point I felt like a nurse more than a midwife. I trained as I'd become a nurse midwife. It was a 4-year course, similar to Angela's. I finished in 1993. I started in 94 working. And I felt like I was a nurse, and I would never have said I'm a midwife. I would have said I'm a nurse. And I was working in those places as a nurse midwife. So when I went over to the UK, and I started doing my advanced midwifery training in Scotland, it's the first time the light went on, and I was like, oh, no, I'm actually a midwife. I really am a midwife. Like, that's what I loved. That's all I loved, really. I mean, I liked everything about it, actually. I loved to attend women. And I found the UK system equally harsh, actually, on women. I found the management very medicalised. I found the hospitals, in fact I worked in the hospital where they invented the epidural. So they tried it out a lot there. And those big boards, I don't know how many of you have seen the business of being born, there's like a big board, white board, room 1, ruptured membranes, 3 centimeters, pitocin, or cetostinon, due for examination again 3 hours. Okay, number 2, this one you'd walk into the duty room and they'd say, you're going to room number 2, and you'd look at the room and you think, oh no. Induction of labour, epidural, 1 centimetre. You think, oh, it's just going to be a nightmare. And that was how every birth was there. So while I was doing my nursing training, I was fortunate enough to work with independent midwives who also worked in Scotland. So I started on my off days, when I wasn't working at in the neonatal nursery, I would go and work with the independent midwives. So I then started to see home birth. And that was a real light again. I was like, wow, you can do it nicely. Like babies can be born nicely. Because all the time in the MOUs, seeing fundal pressure, seeing a lot of forced labour. In hospitals, a lot of like defensive, scared midwives trying to get the baby out so that they wouldn't be blamed for something. So a lot of that I saw now at home. A woman could just have a baby. She could just labour, and she could just give birth, and it wasn't so complicated. You didn't have to have your knives and forks all in a row on the sheet of green sheet, which weren't touch. It could all just be a lot more normal. So for me, that's where I kind of got most of my formative time as a real midwife. I started there, and I moved to London after I finished my training. And I got a job working at John and Lizzie's hospital, which was it's closed now. It was a fantastic birth unit, started by a South African, Yehudi Gordon, who's written many books. With Janet Velasquez, he's written books, but he started this unit. And it was an amazing sanctuary for women. It was big double beds, fantastic food, huge rooms, that the women would have family baths. You'd kind of light the candles, get it all ready, then the whole family would come in. This is postnatally. So they had the baby probably in the bath, and then they would all come in. It was just really beautiful. And it was even more of like what it can be. So when I fell pregnant myself, while I was still working there, I had also done 2 years of agency work in London hospitals. So I'd worked all the London hospitals. I knew them very well, working a 76-hour week, many weeks to get experience and just to kind of learn more about birth. I was very hungry to know more. You're young and you want to know everything about it. I can remember saying to someone, I can't believe they pay me to come here. I just love it. And we just finished like a 12-hour shift, and the woman thought, like, are you crazy? But it was just that love that you have as a midwife. You have a hunger to know it all. And then I fell pregnant with my first child, and we came back to South Africa, and I started working. It was just as Debbie Honey had finished working with Sue, and I started working with Sue as her backup, basically, because she'd been in partnership with Debbie. Debbie was, I think, had gone to United Emirates, I think, and so I started working with Sue backing up. So again, I was in the home birth environment, and then I slowly established my own practice in Fish Hoek, and I worked here until 5 years ago. I was working in Cape Town, attending mostly home births. And I also realized that the midwife fraternity was quite interesting. There was quite a lot of medicalized midwives. There was quite a lot of hospital birth done at home. It felt quite a fledgling occupation. Like people were still establishing themselves, and people hadn't had a chance to unlearn. Like a lot of what I had done was unlearning a lot of what I'd been taught. And it was very challenging in terms of private fraternity here. People in England, to do a VBAC after you've had a previous cesarean section is the norm. Whereas here, you are outrageous to try, especially if you have one at home. That is really, how could you? Do you know that what you've got is very precious? Very precious. And women were really treated in a way that, the women who had home births with me, some of them had previous Caesars. They really had to fight against a system to do something that was actually very normal, but it was seen as so abnormal. And so I found that very, very challenging. But we'd kind of set ourselves 5 years that we would be in Cape Town 5 years, readjusting before we moved to build the birth centre. So after those 5 years, we did move to the Eastern Cape. And what we've built there is basically a very simple cottage. We haven't started the main birth centre. We've been waiting 4 years for land, which apparently is coming through. But it's waiting for one more certificate of something. And during that time, the women approached me and they were saying, we really want something that we want to come for checkups. And then they came for checkups and then there was nowhere to give birth. So then we identified a cottage which is quite central to the village, and we fixed it up. We renovated it, and we started using that. So we've been using that. So we opened that in 2010, and we've been using that ever since, just to be a facility that women can give birth in. It's quite similar actually to the Philippine sounding setup. We don't all live there, but I live about 5 minutes away, and then it's a 2-bedroomed cottage. We have a bathroom, lounge, a little storeroom, and then 2 bedrooms. So usually the woman is in labour, there's a nice big double bed, nice big space. She can be there, she can bring a partner, but it's not culturally actually done. People are not used to having support in labour, and very few will choose to bring someone. And then I work with Nomvula, who's a woman from the village. She has 5 children, she's twins herself. I've never seen her ever look shaken. And she's attended many births, not so easy some of them, and she's a real rock of support in that community. So what happens is normally the woman goes into labour, I'll go and fetch Nomvula. It's a very bad road, it's horrible to walk at night, and well, you can't really walk safely at night. Women don't feel. And I'll fetch her and I'll fetch the woman from their home, we'll go to the birth centre, we'll labour. She'll have a baby, we'll stay there until she's stable, and then Nomvula will stay overnight with her for however many days she stays there. Nomvula brings her kids, they've attended many births, mostly one of them on the back. And it's a very relaxed environment, and it's very beautiful births. So I don't know how much more time have I got. I haven't got a lot.
Keep going.
2 minutes before we can do that. Okay. So we've got a film that we're going to show. It's actually a short clip of a film that we made. We made it for a conference at the ICM, and it was more, at that time we were talking about Ubuntu, you know. You are a people through other people. And like how you are treated affects who you will be. And that's basically what we were saying. It's the same with women. How they are treated in labour determines what kind of mother they will be. And my thing is, I feel we are trying to address a lot in the private sector, but we can address a lot in the government sector. I just think, as Erin Mozzolelli said recently, it involves doing things differently to how they've been done. And differently, I think, is to really change our factory mentality. You know, bigger is not better with birth. Even when you say you've got a birth facility, people go, how many babies have you delivered, and what's the rates? And you know, I don't want to deliver a lot of babies. I want to deliver deliver, you can say birth. I want to be there for nice births. I want the women to feel great. I've had some young girls who, when the babies come out, they've tried to kick me and the baby. And I remembered, like being in Clarke, I can remember that same thing happening there. You know, a young teenage girl, like not sure what to do, and a baby, and I'm not that kind of person. And it was very hard to hold the baby when someone's trying to and you're attached with a cord to put the baby anyway. And I've learned now, you just put the baby down, she might go to sleep for an hour, and she'll wake up and she'll be very accepting of her baby. Whereas in those other environments, often it's quite forced. You know, come on, look after your baby. You've got a baby. But actually, women, when you can tune in, and when you know them a bit better, you can work all of those things to a better end, that they feel, okay, you know, I mean, you've been loving to me, I can be loving. Rather than, I've been so traumatized, I can't think about love. Because I think that's where many women are in those government facilities, that we have no other options at the moment, you know, that's all we have to work in. I think the type of experiences women are having is not nurturing of them. So my motivation is that we do it differently, and that we make small pockets of good care local to the women, where they don't have to travel to the baby-friendly hospital near us, 60 kilometres away. Already that's not baby-friendly, I reckon. And to then be maybe transferred with their baby with no oxygen to the next hospital, which is not baby-friendly. But we've got a baby-friendly sticker that says we are baby-friendly. But you can't labour with anyone with you. But we've done the baby-friendly course. You know, in South Africa, we're very good at going, yes, yes. We've got a problem, yes. We need to fix it, yes. We're very good at kind of realizing that there's a problem and doing nothing about it. So that's why I see this as a nice swell in the right direction. It's the first wave I've seen of midwives and women kind of coming together. And the only change comes from the consumer. And, you know, the rural women haven't got the voice to push. So it's got to be the rest of us have to push for us to have a better system in place. So this is the